Here we go. Okay, good evening, everyone. Right, we are going to learn several things, which I think connect. I think so. We will see how we develop it, but they connect in a very specific way. The question is that really what surrounds the whole parsha. This is a parsha which has the most disparate events in more than any other parsha in the Torah. There's an incredible number of different events that takes place in Behaalosecha. But if there's one theme, then it's a theme of journeying, because it's all that carries it through the whole way through. If there is a continuous theme through it, then it is the concept of journeying. That's the center of the parsha, right? And that's the center point of the parsha. And both before and afterwards are episodes that accompany the Bnei Yisrael on that journey. So the concept of journeying, the Dugalim, the flag. So this is what the focus of the shir is. And the Kli Yakar has a fascinating and very, very different approach to the whole episode with Yisro. He asks a number of questions on it. It's Perek Yud Posuk Chof Tes, and he has a number of problems with it. The dialogue between Moshe and his father-in-law is strange for a number of reasons. If you just look at the Pesukim, so Moshe says to Chovov, the son of Roel HaMidjani, the first question, why Chovov? Why we call him Chovov? Why not call him Yisro? You know what's going on with the name, right? No, sim anachnu, we're journeying. Hashem has told us to get with this place. We are on the way there. L'choetonu, he says, come with us. The tabernacle will do good to you. Ki Hashem diber tov al Yisrael, because Hashem has spoken positively about Yisrael. By Yomer Ilov, he says, Loi elech, I'm not going to go. Ki em al artzi vel maladati elech, because I'm going to go home. I don't want to go with you. And the Kli Yakar picks up here on the different phraseology. Moshe Rabbeinu says, Noisim, we're journeying. He doesn't say we're journeying. Yisro in his response says, I'm not going to go with you. I'm not going. What's the difference between halicha and nasiya? What is the difference between those things, right? You're going somewhere, or you're journeying. What's the difference? And then Moshe Rabbeinu doesn't give up. Don't leave us. You know how we've encamped in the desert. And you were for us, and this is a very strange phrase, a difficult phrase, but you were literally means that you were to us, for us as eyes. What exactly does that mean? So, so the Targum, because of the difficulty here, says basically that it means that you know how we've lived in the desert, and you understand what we have encountered. Right? And the mighty things, right, that have happened to us, the wonders and everything else, you've seen them with your own eyes. But it's a bit difficult. It's not a simple pshat. People often forget that the Targum is a commentary. It's a pirush. It's not always a translation, even though we assume it is, right? And here it's an example of he's giving a pirush. Why is the Targum giving an explanation? Because the difficulty in the words. What does it mean you were for us as eyes? What does that mean, right? So that's the Targum's pshat. Rashi says two other explanations. Either it's the future, everything that's hidden from us, you will enlighten our eyes. And that's also difficult to understand, because at the end of the day, Yisro is in addition to that. He's Moshe Rabbeinu's father-in-law. We know that he provides guidance when it comes to the episode of the appointment of the Shoftim in Israel. But what does it mean that you're going to, anything difficult, he says, you're going to light our eyes? Well, there's great people here as well, right? There's Moshe Rabbeinu and Aaron, and there's the whole process. And they're saying, and his argument, his technique to make him stay is, anything difficult, you'll solve for us. Well, who says? Who says he's going to be the one who's going to say? So what does that mean? She gives another explanation. You will be as cherished to us like the apple of our eye, basically. As it says, again, it's also a bit difficult because again, again, that doesn't work with the simple translation of the pasuk. You will be for us like the preciousness of our eyes. It's challenging. So there's it. And then Yisro's response. Then it says he doesn't respond anymore. He says, when you go with us, the good that Hashem has done for us, that will also be good for you. So here as well, you have a problem, because how does that? He's already said, "I want to go home." So how is that good, that tov? How is that an argument that will make him change his mind? Right? Well, what is going to change him? Right? I'm going home, he says. I want to go back to my homeland. That's where I belong, right? So, and then of course we don't have a response from Yisro at all to that. And there's a whole question and debate exactly whether what he did and everything else. But Kleopa says like this. Okay, so he brings several of these questions, he says, yeah. Right, and he picks up on, as I said, on the discrepancy between the journeying or going. What's the difference? And he says like this. If you look at the second paragraph in the Kliyakar, he says like this: "V'nireh sheloshan halicha." The first paragraph is the questions. The second paragraph is "V'nireh sheloshan halicha nofel al tnuas raglaim levad." You understand what the word halicha means? Halicha means walking, just the movement of the legs. Hamatikin es odom b'mokom lemokom, which takes a person from one place to another place, right? Yeah, Avram, press the button. Do you mind pressing the button on the aircon? Then we won't. Then we can imagine we are a bit cooler. That's it. You just need to press it. We'll go. Thank you. But it can be that if a person goes to another place, he can still be attached to the place that he came from. Just because you walk from place A to place B doesn't mean you forget about place A, right? Halicha just means transporting yourself from one place to another. When you say the word to be nosea, to journey, it's a very important concept. That means a complete movement, a complete transportation in every way, that you are no longer connected at all. That's what a nesia is, he says. You're not connected at all to where you were before. He says, I'll bring you a proof. What does Hashem say to Avram Avinu? Halicha, go. Now this is strange, because you'd think, well, we want to, it should be no say, go, right? Go, because tisa or whatever, because what you don't want to be, the whole point is you shouldn't be connected where you were, but no, it's a psychological thing, he says. Because he's going to still be attached to his home. He's not going to be able to leave entirely, immediately. It's not going to work. By human nature, he's still going to be attached. After that, he reaches the level of journeying, right? First he walked, and then he was nosea. Because then he began to gradually forget the idolatry in his father's house. In other words, what he's saying is, Hashem says lech lecha, because it's got to come in stages. First, you're going to be halicha. First, walk. And it's going to be difficult. And you're going to want to go back sometimes. And you're going to remember. And you're going to miss it and everything else. Then you will get haloch v'noseh hanegba. You will walk and then you will come to journey. Okay? So he's established a very important principle of the difference between going somewhere. And this is very important for the whole explanation that follows. Halicha means to walk from place A to place B. And where you're still connected in many ways to where you've been. And nosea is a complete transformation and a complete movement. So he says now like this. This is why it says that the parsha starts off with Moshe said to Chovov. He says it conceals the name Yisro. At this stage, the word Yisro could have implied something negative. There is Gemara's in Yevamos that there can be a negative ramification sometimes of having potentially Gerim attached to us. Sometimes the different explanations why, and sometimes because it shows us up what we do wrong, all sorts of things. There's different explanations in the Gemara. But the idea of Yisro, the word yeter, is something additional, like it's an added extra. Okay, an added extra. It can imply a negative. It's interesting that that's the meaning of the word, right? Yisro, meaning because he added on. He was an addition to the Jewish people, right? Here, if he addresses him with the word Yisro, he says, "Hey Yisro, please." Probably in a respectful way to his father-in-law, or whatever, please stay with us. He's already on the wrong foot because you're just an additional piece. So he doesn't say that. He says, Chovov, you're cherished. Chaviv is to be cherished to us. That's what you mean to us, right? Okay? The whole hint is, no, the pathway that we're going with you is you shall love the ger. On the contrary, we cherish you. You're precious to us. You're not just an addition. You're something. You're part and parcel of who we are. That's why he says that's why he asks him to go. But he says, no, we're journeying. Why? Because he says, We are leaving completely. We've got nothing left. No simanachnu. We are going to forget everywhere we've been. Mitzrayim, everything else. We are completely new. But but for you, you're not journeying. You're not at that level. You are still going away. You're halicha, right? So he says to him, you understand, it's very clever. He says, we are journeying, but he says, L'cha, you, L'cha etanu. You come with us. Because for you, it's a halicha. It's not an asiyah, right? And but he says, even so, I asked this from you because Hashem has spoken good about us. I'll try and paraphrase some of what he's saying. Hashem has commanded lahitziv v'misha medabek bonu. We need to do good for those who connect themselves to us. Okay, that's how it is. And he brings psukim to support it. But yes, so in other words, basically, he addresses him in a respectful way. You're cherished, you're precious to us. Although we have forgotten everything we left behind, we recognize that for you this is going to be a challenge. You're a halicha, you're not an asiyah, right? What's Yisro's response? Loy elech. I'm not going to go. Why? Yisro is upset. Why did you address me with the word halicha? As if I'm still connected. As if you're assuming that I have some deep-seated connection to where I've come from. That I'm not actually that connected to the ideals that you stand for. And really, I don't want to come with you and it's going to be a big challenge. And yet you're still asking me to wrench myself away. He said, it's not true. Because I'm completely attached to you in every way. I don't have a desire to go back home at all because of that. But I'm upset that you phrased it like that. It's not because I still have an attachment. But what does he say? But he says, he says, I will go back. I do want to go back for a different reason. Not because I can't leave, and not because I still have some residual attachment that I need to be part of, but because I want to go home to bring others closer. I have a land, I have a homeland. I want to bring them. I don't want to leave them all behind. They matter to me. I want to bring them close to the Torah, to the ideals of the Torah. That's why he wants to go back. That's what he says. That will inspire me. I'll be attached to these ideals and I'll bring them with me. It sounds like a good plan. It's worth staying with it with this kliyakra. It's quite, he goes through the whole thing, but it's a beautiful, beautiful explanation. Then, okay, so far we said he asks him to come with, even though it's difficult for you. Yisro's upset because he says, what do you mean? As for me, I don't have any problem leaving. I'm completely like you. It's just, I want to go back because I want to bring them. I want to bring them with us. Hashem then, but Moshe Rabbeinu then says, don't forsake us. Moshe Rabbeinu says, I never suspected that through you going back home, you're going to forget this incredible, the incredible events, the holy things that you've witnessed. I didn't think that. I didn't mean that. What I was worried about was, you know what I was worried about? Because you've seen all our bad stuff. You've seen everywhere we've gone wrong. You've seen all the times we messed up, all the complaints, right? And every time we stop, there's machlokas, there's bad things, problems going on, and people are complaining, right? And that's why he says, I'm worried that you won't come back. If you leave us, you won't come back. Because you say, what do I need the hassle for? What do I need to attach myself to these people? I can live the ideals somewhere else. You know, there's always machlokas going on with these people. And that's why he says, don't forsake us. He says, I'm worried that it will be because of us. Al not ta'azov osonu means us. Don't leave because of us, he's saying. Don't leave because of us. Because you know everything that's transpired. You understand that we went through times whilst we were all the encampments when we did complain. And I'm worried that that's why you won't come back. And you'll always be thinking, maybe it'd be better over there. And I won't have all these problems. And then he says, he says, don't forsake even us. You know why I want you to stay with us? He says, you have a fundamentally important role to play by staying with us. Because everyone else will learn a kal v'chomer from you. You managed to leave your birthplace, your homeland, and your v'sorasecha, your position, your official role, Yet you came to attach yourself to the Shechina, Kal v'chomer Yisrael. How much more so the Bnei Yisrael? And he says that's what it means for Yisolonu Le'inaim in the future. You will be for us. You will guide us. You will be the eyes for us. In other words, the zchus of this whole people will be dependent on you. You're saying that you're going back home to bring everyone near, bring everyone also close to the Shekhinah. I'm worried, Moshe Rabbeinu says, that you're leaving really because of us. Because you know that we're not always so well behaved, basically, right? You know that we're not always living up to the ideals that we should be. But you have an incredibly unique potential and role to make. You can be a guide to us. We can look at you and say, wow, this individual left his people because of what we stand for. How much more so? What a responsibility do we have to do the same thing? And therefore, he says, the last little piece, he says, it shall be when you come with us, that good that Hashem has done with us, he will do to you. Because when you come with us, the Kli Yakar says, and your thoughts and everything is dependent, and he says, when you go with us, and you see that we have all these problems, and we need you so to bring it as chus for everyone else. In other words, that they'll see you and they will learn this kal v'chomer, how much more so we should do the right thing. Then all that good that Hashem does to us, but when we act correctly, that you will receive a huge benefit of that as well, because since you are the ultimate cause for us finding the right path, right? In Kemi, then of course you're going to get that tremendous schus of everyone else is going to be yours. And he says, Yisro was silent after that, and he didn't respond. Why? Because he accepted the argument that the merit, the schus of bringing merit to the public outweighs all other arguments. So the back and forth in the dialogue here, according to Kli Yakar, was very specific. It was an argument essentially about the concept of journey and what it means. Moshe Rabbeinu says, we have forgotten everything. We've left everything behind. For you, it's not the same type of journey. You're still connected. And Yisro says, no, I'm not connected. I have no problem leaving. But I want to bring everyone. I want to bring others. I want to bring them closer. And Moshe Rabbeinu says that, no, ultimately, my concern is that really you've seen all our negative points. So you're really not so happy here because you're thinking that, well, these people are not always so great. So the ultimate knockout argument that he has is that even though there are huge challenges in this journey that we are on, and it's not simple, and that is the parsha really, because from here onwards, pretty much to the end, obviously, basically from the middle of Parshas Behaalosecha until halfway through. I suppose really chukas, even chukas is, it's pretty much challenges and difficulties, and the whole way through, right? There's the whole, going on. So this is going to be a very challenging journey. But he says you have the power, you have the opportunity of zikui harabim, of bringing people close, bringing people back, because they will learn from you to do the right thing. I think it's a beautiful explanation.
You're saying it wasn't enough.
He did. No. He says he was. Well, he says he was quiet. He says he was quiet. It's not clear whether I think we generally understand. No, that he did stay. I think we say that he did stay. I believe so. I believe that he did listen. I think there's if I'm not mistaken. What? The Torah leaves it unsaid because it means he was silent. Meaning he accepted the argument. That's how the Kli Yakar understands it. The last line, he says, Shosak Yisro v'nertalo. The Kli Yakar says that he was silent, and effectively he agreed with it. Because the great merit of the tzibur, of the public, right? And Rashi also brings that there was therefore an area of land that they left for Yisro. There was a certain area in Eretz Yisrael they inherited. You find that later because there was a problem with Amalek. Do you remember they told them to leave the area because we're destroying Amalek because that was near where they lived. So they ultimately did come along. Yeah. Now the question is, in broadly speaking, just to cover a few more points here, how are we to understand some of those challenges? The parsha, the rest of the parsha that talks about the complaints and everything else, etc., etc. Ali Shur says the only way to learn the Torah and particularly difficult parts of it like this, is to understand that you need to come to it with depth, and you need to always understand that if you look at it in a simplistic, it's always going to be something. You're always going to be mistaken. You're always going to end up missing the key the key ideas. He says one example of that is this parsha. He says, if you look and you want to try and understand what was going on here when they complained and said, we remember all the food and everything else, Mitzrayim was a wonderful, it was a chaner, a dog, the fish. He says, you want to understand what they were saying? Think how we all feel. And he says in Ale Shur Chelik Beis, think how you feel on Motzei Yom Kippur. Why? He says, you had the whole day, you're on a certain level, hopefully, right? How do we leave Yom Kippur? That's the question, he says. Do we leave it, he says, do most people leave it in a sense of tremendous joy, okay? If you leave it with joy, is it really because of simcha on the forgiveness? Or is it basically, wow, I survived. I survived, right? So you're like removing the yoke of that day, he says. And then, he says, you get home and you sit down to eat. Do we still feel the holiness of the day, right? In the way we speak, the way we conduct ourselves? He's trying to bring you a way of relating to what's going on here, right? The way we eat, the way we bench, everything else? Or is it all again? Like the meal is like, oh, wow, phew. Life goes on. Life, feel like we're back to normal. And he says, why do we do this? Why is it that we can't remain on that level? Listen to these words. It's written in it, right? It is very difficult to maintain a trajectory or a high level for a long period of time. To stay at that level is immensely difficult. And he says that's how you can have a small pathway into understanding what's going on here. When they say Zochanu es hadogo, we remember the fish that we ate everything in Mitzrayim. It wasn't that they were like, oh, desperate for some food, for some normal food. That wasn't what they were saying. It was an expression of their seeming feeling of inability to maintain the level of what it meant to be what we call the Oichlei Hamon. Those who lived at that level all the time. They would be expected to live at this level, this incredibly holy level, right? And the problem was they felt that we don't have the strength. We can't maintain that level anymore, that incredibly high spiritual level. And that's why the Torah says, Yan ma'astem as Hashem, the response is because you've despised Hashem asher b'kibrachem. Okay? In other words, the way Chazal understand these words, because you've despised Hashem asher b'kirbechem, who is within you, the Chazal understand, Hashem says, if I hadn't put my Shekhinah amongst you, you would never have entered these whole ideas. Where did their sins come from in this context? It came from the fact that they were on such a high level, that they had the Shekhinah with them. He says this is an example of how, if you don't learn it properly, and you don't think about it in this type of way, you make the mistake of thinking, oh, so simple. They just wanted, like, does that really make sense? They just wanted a bit more food. Of course, that's not what it means. It means there was a cry of saying, we can't maintain this level. And this was a problem. This was a challenge. And the idea, therefore, is again, that shows you that you therefore have to understand it on a deeper level. You have to begin to understand what's going on. I'll just bring you, in the few minutes we have left, two explanations of the one aspect of it, this concept of the taiva. Yeah, when it says the whole idea of Zochanu es hadogo, these psukim, right? They wept. Who will give us some meat to eat? Two different pshatim. One is the Emes Liyaakov. The Emes Liyaakov says that they were complaining over the food in Mitzrayim. Okay, but Rashi says Posuk Yud later on, that what were they really weeping about? They were weeping about the family situation. They were weeping on the fact that they were forbidden to have certain relationships. That was really what they were weeping about. So he says, where did he get that from? Where do we see, okay? Where did Chazal see that? They didn't mention that at all. right? They say clearly what their problem was. The problem was they wanted the food. So why is it that Chazal said they were weeping because they had to keep rules and they had to keep there were forbidden relationships and that disturbed them? Well, why did they have to explain it in that way? And then Messiah Yaakov says that Chazal with this descended to and understood a very fundamental, we're trying to bring out a very important point about the power of the subconscious, right? There are people, we have to be honest with ourselves and recognize when we have a certain thought process in our minds that seems, well, this is why I'm doing something. You've got to be honest with yourself sometimes and analyze, why am I really doing this? What's going on in the subconscious, okay? It couldn't be. Chazal understood, he says, either Baruch Kodsham with Ruach HaKodesh, or just in the way, he says, you can understand it in a symbol, he's being mitzad hamada v'haseichel, the way the mind works, right? That it can't be that it's just in the simple explanation that these great people were simply missing some food, okay? He says, they wept over the food, yes, but deep within them, there were other things. They were bothered about the rules, about the restrictions, right? The fact that they couldn't live lives how they wanted to live, right? And that was a subconsciously, that was coming out on the surface with, oh, we missed the food in Mitzrayim, but really there was a subconscious, it's the restrictions on us, which fits, by the way, with Ali Shur's approach. That was the maintaining of the spiritual level in that way. Maybe it was about and as expressed in this way. And finally, the Ponim Yofos, is Pinchas Halevi Horowitz says like this. He says that that what was going on. He says what was going on about the same sort of question. Why with the meat and everything else? What do they want? What was the pretext? What was the taiva of meat? He says that the Erev Rav were with them. They didn't have meat. But the Bnei Israel had meat. They had sona bokar. So what were they worried about? They weren't worried. It says, when they went out of Mitzrayim, but they had cattle, they had flocks, they had sheep. What was the problem? Okay, so it says, not a single one died. Well, those flocks would have had other flocks. So what were they worried about? What was the problem? They didn't have enough meat. They had enough meat. So he says like this: they were worried that if they shecht the animals in the future, they will not have enough. They were worried about the future. They say, who will feed us in the future meat? If we eat what we have now, what are we going to have in the future? And that's why they said we remember Zochanu es Hadoga, Asher Noichal. It doesn't say that we ate. He says that they were saying like this: in Egypt, we knew where the next meal was always going to come from. We might have been living as slaves, but we always knew where it was coming from. We knew we'd get food. There will be food there. And their worry essentially here was, okay, we've got enough food for today, but who says we're going to have enough in the future? What are we going to eat in the future? Are we always going to have enough food? It was a worry about the future. Moshe Rabbeinu's response to them was, can I bear this people as bear the, what's it called, the youngster, right? And he says the words, on the land that you promised to its ancestors. You're telling me to bear them in the land. What does that mean? Because we're worrying about the future. They're mourning about the future. That's what they're concerned about. And therefore, it's not going to be whatever you give them. They're going to always say there's a problem about the future. Okay. And then we have to understand how the response is. But the principle he's trying to say is, at least I think you can understand it this way, is that when a person starts worrying always what will be, there isn't really an answer. You want me to bear them in the land once you promise that they're always going to be worries. They're always going to be worried in the future. You're never going to be able to satisfy them because there's always going to be a future worry. Man, I've got enough today because I'm going to have enough tomorrow. So that's two different approaches to it. Was it a subconscious issue with the restrictions that were on them? It came out in a way that was without food, but it was really the subconscious laws, halachas, and restrictions that were being placed on them? Or is it simply the fact that once you start worrying about the we're all concerned about the future, but that fundamentally they were saying we've got food today. Who says we'll always have food? And that's a very hard argument to answer, because you can always say, well, okay, I'll give you 50 next week or next month, what about the next year? And there's always going to be that worry, right? In other words, the message being, there has to be a level of bitachon, there has to be a level of trust. So this is hopefully some ideas just about, as I said, the complexity of that, of the complexity of what it means, the journey they went on. And again, just to finish with that beautiful idea of the kliyokar, that the zchus harabim is the ultimate argument that Yisro accepts, even though he's got his own reasons to go back. When Moshe Rabbeinu says to him, if you stay with us, the influence you can have on others and bring them close, that's immense. And that ultimately wins the day. Because even if we have our own worries and our own concerns and everything else, if you can do something for someone else, and you can bring them, you can lift them up, ultimately you're the one who gains the most. There you are. Okay. Thank you for coming. Have a good evening. Have a good Shabbos, everyone.
Thank you.
Okay, good Shabbos.